The coin is one of the most fundamental mechanics in Hearthstone. You will see it in almost every single game mode except for mercenaries in Battlegrounds. And whether you like it or not, this coin has been around for so long that it is basically a fundamental mechanic for understanding how Hearthstone is played. But did you know that the coin wasn't always in Hearthstone? In fact, there was a completely different idea for the coin. Before we get to that, we have to understand where the coin actually came from originally. And this goes all the way back when Hearthstone was first being developed. Once Hearthstone had a solid foundation of the game's mechanics for the cards and the classes and how they wanted the game to play out, they started testing out the game and they found a significant problem. After playtesting the game a bunch, the player going first seemed to have a significant advantage. They were winning a lot, and I don't mean a little bit, I mean a lot. The main problem with Hearthstone is how the game is played out. There is always going to be a first turn advantage because the person going first gets to spend their mana first. And unlike in other card games where you could do stuff on your opponent's turn, you have to sit there and watch your opponent play their entire turn first before you could do something in Hearthstone. Which means the player going first had a ginormous advantage because they were always dictating tempo. The player going first always got the ability to play their minions and their spells first, which means the second player was virtually always reacting to what the first player had to do, which means they can never overtake the board state. And it led to a win percentage for the person going first around 75%. Imagine having a 75% win rate in Hearthstone. Obviously, the Hearthstone developers had to find a solution to this issue. The player going second was in a horrible situation majority of the time, but they had to be a little bit careful. You don't want to just give the second player something insane so they have a huge advantage over the first player and mess with the whole game balance. First thing that they tried was a fairly simple solution to this problem. They decided to give the second player an extra card. So the second player had 4 cards in their starting hand and the first player only had 3. Unfortunately for the developers, this didn't really solve the problem whatsoever. Even having an extra card in their opening hand did not really matter because they were still falling behind on tempo always, which basically led to the exact same win rate around 75%. Now you might be asking yourself, why don't they give the second player another card so they start with 5 rather than 3? But I think from a player perspective, if I saw you with 5 cards and I only had 3, that feels kind of weird and it doesn't feel like the game is actually balanced, even though I still have the advantage going first. And I think that's why the Hearthstone developers try to avoid this tactic. The Hearthstone developers tried to do something a little bit more extreme. Rather than giving the player an extra resource, they gave the player 5 extra health so that they would start at 35 rather than 30. It appeared though that these 5 extra health points were not enough to counter the tempo gained by the player that went first, because it turned out even though you have 5 additional life, it does not help you in the actual real battle at hand, which is maintaining the board, because the person going first still got to dictate how the board played out. Now, this method of raising the health by 5 did matter in some matchups. If we're both playing an aggressive deck, the 5 health actually might make the difference of me killing you before you can kill me. But in most of the other matchups where the health was not as much as a priority, this did not make a difference. A really good example of this is between 2 control warrior players and you just have the ability to Alex. That 5 life that you got at the start of the game made 0 difference. Quick little side note while I was editing. It is possible to raise the health past 30, which means that technically if Hearthstone actually wanted to in standard, we can go above 30 health, maybe to 35 or 40, and maybe that would change the game a lot. What do you think? Even though the extra 5 life to the second player did not really fix the issue, it did give Blizzard some insight. The solution to their problem had to be relevant for every single matchup, which led Blizzard to try a completely different idea, which was to implement an extra card that would be given to the player who went second. But in this case, it was not a spell that gave you an extra mana crystal. It was called Avatar of the Coin, and it was a 0 mana 1/1. That's right, they gave the player going second a minion. Now, you may think that having an extra 1/1 was a really beneficial thing, and for sure in some matchups it really does matter. If you basically start with a wisp on your board, it could be the difference of you winning or losing against an aggressive deck. But a lot of the time, just like +5 health on your hero, this did not really make a difference whatsoever. It could just be brawled away, flame striked, AoE down. It did not really matter because the 1/1 was just not impactful enough to be relevant in in every single matchup. The 1-1 also gave an issue of being really good in certain archetypes and also useless in others. Obviously, if you're playing a control deck and you go second, having the extra 1-1 is not going to really make that much of a difference. But with a deck like Zoo Warlock, where the potential is to power overwhelming it, abusive sergeant it, defender of Argus, utilize it with knife juggler, this 1-1 became a lot more of a problem in those type of decks, which means this is the counter issue of the +5 health being very good in some things, but very bad in others. The other really big issue that I have not really addressed in this video is how it affected other game modes like Arena. The bigger problem with having something like a 1-1 additionally in Arena could be very impactful, as it allows you to have that initial tempo that could just lead you to snowballing the game, which definitely isn't a great way of balancing that mode either. Hey, it's editor Rarran again. I just had a really interesting thought that I wanted to ask you. Do you think that having a 1-1 right now rather than the coin would make this game a lot less balanced? I think as of right now, with the current way the game is made and how crazy impactful a lot of the cards we see are right now, this is like not that big of a deal. But in the same sense, Patches was really good because it just summoned a 1-1 with charge. Going second to get an extra 1-1 Patches could be very impactful. It was back to the drawing board for the Hearthstone developers. This issue of the player going second was going to be the reason why maybe Hearthstone wasn't released, because if they could not balance this game would just be not fun to play for 50% of the time, and that sounds atrocious. But at the end of the day, all that matters is what is in the game right now, and that is the coin. The coin was the fundamental breakthrough that Hearthstone needed in order for the second player to not have as much of a disadvantage. The coin solved two of the bigger issues that the developers had. The first one was the feeling of going second. The ability to play something that was a higher mana cost than you currently had was a very good feeling for the player going second, because it felt like you were doing something more impactful than the player going first. Second major issue that they solved is the ability to do something proactive against the player that was going first. The issue that they always had was that the player going first would dictate tempo, therefore you were always playing reactive and you can never be proactive in a game of Hearthstone. But with the coin, you're able to be proactive because you point out something stronger, which means your opponent then has to react to what you did, and therefore allowing the game to be a lot more even than it used to be. The coin was also a very nice resource to have in every single archetype. Whether you're an aggressive deck, a control deck, a combo deck, it did not matter. It always felt good to have the coin in your starting hand. Even though the coin was a very nice addition to Hearthstone, they did end up showing at BlizzCon that the player going first still had a very slight advantage than the player going second, but this was arguably the closest it was going to be. As the years went on for Hearthstone, during March 2015, the win rate was a lot closer to 50-50 regardless who went first and who went second, which means the only time this really seems to matter is, well, Arena. Thank you for watching my video. If you did end up enjoying it, I would really appreciate a subscription and a like, and I'll see you guys in the next one. You look fantastic.